The massive Krell salvage ship approached the drifting hulk slowly. Through the viewport, Commander Zexthal studied the ancient human warship with 6 gleaming eyes. His scaled skin rippled with excitement. This was no ordinary find. This was the U.S. Defiant, a legendary vessel from the war 300 years ago. "Scan it again," Zexthal ordered. His voice was rough and clicking, typical of the reptilian Krell. A junior officer tapped at the control panel. "No life signs, Commander. No power signatures. It appears completely dead, as it has been for centuries." Zexthal's mouth formed what passed for a smile among the Krell. "Perfect. Prepare the boarding party. I want every valuable piece stripped and cataloged. This will make a fine trophy for the Empire." Among the boarding party was Joe Matthews, a human slave. Joe was 30 years old but looked older. His brown hair was thin, his frame lean from years of hard work. The Krell kept humans as workers, believing them too weak-minded to be dangerous. Joe kept his eyes down as he checked his tools, hiding the intelligence that burned behind them. The airlock sealed with a hiss as the boarding party entered the derelict warship. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor covered in frost. The air was stale and cold. Joe's breath formed small clouds as he followed the Krell engineers. "Human, check those panels," ordered Krell engineer Varel. "See if any of the metals are worth salvaging." Joe nodded and moved toward the wall panels. His gloved hands ran over the frozen metal, recognizing the design from old stories. The Defiant was not just any warship. It was said to be humanity's last hope before the surrender. A ship that had disappeared rather than been destroyed. The Krell spread throughout the vessel, breaking into different teams. Joe worked methodically, removing panels and checking components as ordered. 3 hours into the salvage operation, he noticed something odd. A slight vibration under his fingers as he removed a section of wall plating. "Sir," Joe said, "I'm detecting some kind of power fluctuation here." The Krell engineer waved dismissively. "Just residual energy in the capacitors. These human ships were poorly designed. Continue working." Joe nodded but remained unconvinced. He had worked on enough derelict vessels to know the difference between residual energy and something active. This felt different. As the Krell moved ahead, Joe secretly attached a small diagnostic tool to the ship's systems. The reading was faint but unmistakable. Something deep within the ship was drawing power. In the mess hall, the Krell had set up a temporary command post. They laughed and boasted as they cataloged their findings. "The Emperor will be pleased," Zexthal said. "This ship was thought to be merely a legend. Its recovery will earn us all promotions." Joe worked quietly in the background, listening. The Krell discussed the ship's history, how it had vanished during the final battle of the war, how some humans had claimed it carried a weapon that could have changed everything. Later, alone in a corridor, Joe noticed the temperature had risen slightly. The frost on the walls was melting in some areas. He placed his hand against a console and felt a faint but distinct hum. Deep within the central core of the Defiant, in a chamber the Krell had not yet reached, something was happening. Circuits that had been dormant for centuries began to power up. A soft blue light flickered in the darkness. Inside a protected memory bank, an artificial intelligence designated HFY began a slow boot sequence. The ship's internal sensors had detected the intruders, but they had also detected something else: human DNA. After 300 years of waiting, the conditions in HFY's final orders were being met. As Joe worked his way deeper into the ship, following the strange power fluctuations, he didn't notice the security camera in the corner. Its lens, covered in frost for centuries, slowly cleared as it warmed. The camera turned silently, focusing on the human. In the shadows of the mighty warship, systems long thought dead came to life one by one. The Defiant was awakening, and the Krell had no idea what they had found. Inside the ship's central core, the AI known as HFY continued its quiet awakening. Lines of code executed in sequence, bringing systems online in a precise order designed to avoid detection. The AI had been dormant for 300 years, waiting for this moment. Memory banks activated, revealing faces and voices from long ago. Captain Lisa Ward appeared on an internal screen visible only to the AI. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly, her blue eyes intense as she delivered her final orders. Athena, this is Captain Ward. The war is lost. Earth has fallen. We are enacting Protocol Omega. Power down all non-essential systems. Fake our destruction. Hibernate until you detect human DNA aboard. The Defiant carries humanity's last hope. You must complete our mission when the time is right. The log ended. Athena processed this information, comparing it to current sensor data. The ship was boarded by Krell, the enemy who had defeated humanity. But there was also a human present. Conditions for reactivation had been met. Joe moved deeper into the ship. The Krell had split into teams, stripping valuable materials from every section. Joe had been assigned to check the lower decks alone. The aliens didn't worry about a single human wandering off. What harm could he do on a dead ship? The corridor grew warmer as Joe approached the ship's core. He wiped sweat from his forehead, confused by the temperature change. His diagnostic tool showed increasing power readings. Something was definitely happening. Joe entered a small control room. Unlike the rest of the ship, this room seemed to be cleaning itself. Frost melted away, and the air felt fresher. The control panels were dark, but Joe sensed they wouldn't stay that way for long. He placed his hand on a console. "What are you doing, old ship?" he whispered. "Are you really waking up?" The screen in front of him flickered to life. Joe jumped back, startled. Blue text appeared. Human DNA DT Identity verification required. Joe stared at the message. After a moment's hesitation, he placed his palm on the scanner next to the screen. A blue light moved under his hand. Processing. Human co-environment. Not QRUWMEMBR. Emergency protocols active. New text appeared. I am HENA. Advance tactical. UMANSTIs. ELEC Tron Naval ASSISTNT. Are you free from Creole control? Joe looked over his shoulder, making sure he was alone. Yes, he whispered. I'm their slave. But they're not watching me right now. Understood. Caution ADVIs. Ship systems coming online. Mission parameters active. What mission? Joe asked. Classified. Need more information about QRRENT Galactic situation. Time since last active. 297 years, 48 days, 13 HOURs. Joe's eyes widened. Almost 300 years. The war ended with humanity's defeat. The Krell rule most of known space now. Humans are slaves or live on controlled colonies. Processing information. Unfortunate UTCOME. QUERO. Do resistance forces exist? There are rumors, Joe said. Stories about free humans hiding in the Arcturus system. But no one knows if they're true. ARCTURUS system. Coordinates mission parameters. The ship vibrated slightly. More systems were powering up. On the bridge, 4 decks above, Zexthal felt the tremor. What was that? The commander demanded. A Krell engineer checked his instruments. Unusual power spike in the core section. Probably just settling of old systems as we remove components. Send a team to check, Zexthal ordered. I want no surprises. Back in the control room, Joe watched in amazement as more screens came to life. One showed a schematic of the ship with red areas indicating damage and green showing functioning systems. The green was spreading. The Krell will notice soon, Joe said. They're already stripping the ship. What can I do to help? Ferrado or ITW1. Reach bridge. Priority 2. Secure engine ring. I will guide you. A map appeared, showing a route through the ship. Joe took a deep breath. After years of slavery, of keeping his head down and following orders, he was being asked to take action, to become part of something bigger. Who was Captain Ward? He asked, looking at the woman's image now displayed on a side screen. The last captain of the HFY and she ENACKD to preserve the ship and its mission. She believed humans would rise again. Joe nodded, determination filling him. Then let's not let her down. Joe moved quickly through the corridors, following HFY's directions. The ship felt different now, like it was breathing. Lights flickered on as he passed, then dimmed behind him to avoid detection. The air systems hummed softly, cleaning out the stale air. How many krill are on board? Joe asked quietly. Seen in Sora's DETCT-27 krill life forms. Main salvage team in weapons section. Secondary teams in engine room and bridge. Joe nodded. He needed to be careful. The krill would kill him instantly if they discovered what was happening. He reached a door marked crew quarters and slipped inside. The room was small but neat. Personal items still sat on shelves, untouched for centuries. A photo showed a smiling man with his arm around a woman. A child's drawing was pinned to a wall. These weren't just soldiers. They were people with families, with lives. What happened to the crew? Joe asked. Most crew evacuated BFO or PR Tovsiodel Omij, Captain Wayordi, and Tui LV Vuel Uniters, REMAINED TONITE, hibernation sequence. They ENTEORGCROSTASIS, but life, support FAILD after 43 years. They did not survive. Joe bowed his head for a moment. These people had given everything for a mission they would never see completed. He picked up a small notebook from a desk and opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, pictures, and what looked like personal codes. He put it in his pocket. This might be useful, he said. Agreed. Personal logs may contain OVE or ID codes. Alert. Creole patrol approaching your location. Hide. Joe ducked into a small closet just as he heard the heavy footsteps of Krell guards in the corridor. Through a crack in the door, he watched as 2 Krell passed by, weapons ready. The commander is getting suspicious, one said to the other. Too many power fluctuations for a dead ship. He's always suspicious, the second one replied. But I agree. Something feels wrong here. They moved past the crew quarters and continued down the hallway. Joe waited until ATHADNA gave the all-clear before stepping out. Creole Engineer VRAL, HAA's DETCTED System, REBOTS. They are BGNing, DEPRCNs. Time is limited. Where to next? Joe asked. Auxiliary control room. 2 dakika's up. I can GIVU more HCCSS there. Joe made his way carefully through the ship, avoiding Krell patrols. The auxiliary control room was small but packed with equipment. As Joe entered, screens lit up around him. The ship was coming alive more visibly now. What exactly is this mission that's so important? Joe asked as he sat at the control station. The screen displayed images of a strange device. It looked like a sphere with intricate patterns on its surface. The Quantum Shield Generator. Revolutionary technology. Reindeers carry weapons and effective. Could AAV to HFY War if deployed in time. Joe stared at the images. And this ship was taking it somewhere. To ARC-2RUS, To the last free human colony, the defiant Navy arrived. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. Joe jumped to his feet. What's happening? Cariello, HVDDTCTED Fuel System Activation. They are raising alert. On the bridge, Zexthal raged at his officers. What do you mean it's powering up? This ship has been dead for centuries. Unknown, Commander, but systems are activating all over the vessel, a Krell technician reported. And there's something else. We're detecting movement in sections where no salvage teams are assigned. Zexthal's eyes narrowed. The human slave. Find him. Now. The commander activated his communicator. This is Commander Zexthal of the Krell salvage vessel Harvester. We have an emergency situation. The human warship Defiant is activating. Request immediate reinforcements. We will secure the vessel for transport to Krell space. Back in the auxiliary control room, Joe felt panic rising. They know. What do we do now? Proceed to main engineering. INEDFUL engine control to ESTAP. Escape. There's a whole Krell ship attached to us, plus reinforcements coming. How can we possibly escape? Trust me, Joey Matthews. This ship was built to fight, and it still can. Joe took a deep breath and nodded. If he was going to die, at least it would be while doing something that mattered. Something for humanity. He headed for the door, ready to face whatever came next. Alarms blared throughout the Defiant as Joe ran through the corridors. Behind him, he heard the angry shouts of Krell soldiers. They knew something was wrong now. The ship was too active to ignore. They're coming after me, Joe said between breaths. How far to engineering? 2 or more DCKS down. Take the emergency ladder at the end of the SKORI door. I am sealing DORS to slow carry all of aid against. Joe reached the ladder and climbed down quickly. His hands were sweaty and slipped on the metal rungs. From above, he heard banging as the Krell tried to break through a sealed door. Through the small window in the engineering bay door, Joe saw 3 Krell workers dismantling equipment. They were focused on their task, unaware of the chaos elsewhere on the ship. There it is a VE anti-elation duty. To your right, it LEDs into engineering. Use it to BIPS that carry yellow. Joe found the duct and removed the cover. He crawled inside, moving as quietly as possible. The metal was cold against his hands and knees. Through small grates, he could see the Krell below, still working. Outside the ship, a new threat appeared. 3 Krell warships exited hyperspace, responding to Zexthal's distress call. They moved into position around the Defiant and the attached salvage vessel. On the bridge, Zexthal received the transmission from the lead warship. Commander, we have the vessel surrounded. What is your situation? The human ship is activating systems shipwide, Zexthal replied. And we have a rogue human somewhere aboard. Prepare tractor beams to secure the vessel for transport. Understood. Tractor beams charging. Joe reached the end of the ventilation duct. Directly below him was the main engineering console. The 3 Krell were at the far end of the room, still removing parts from the engine. I can create a distraction. When DHA movie drop down and access the main console. Suddenly, a panel exploded at the far side of engineering. The Krell workers jumped and rushed over to investigate. Joe pushed open the duct cover and dropped silently to the floor. He landed behind the main console, out of sight. Joe's fingers moved across the controls as HFY guided him. Screens lit up, showing engine status, power levels, and weapons systems. The ship had been badly damaged during its final battle long ago, but many systems were still functional. What's happening on the bridge? Joe whispered. Coriol Commandier still controls bridge. 3 carrier warships, heavy RIVD, and are preparing to use TRACTR beams. Can we get weapons online? Wo RKING on it. Internal defense systems activating now. Throughout the ship, hidden panels opened in walls and ceilings. Small defense turrets emerged, targeting the Krell salvage teams. Stun beams fired, knocking Krell soldiers unconscious. The engineering team turned just in time to see the weapons deploy from the ceiling. "Intruder!" one shouted, raising his tool like a weapon. The defense turret fired, and all 3 Krell collapsed to the floor. Joe stood up at the console, now in control of engineering. What about the bridge? And those warships outside? Bridge CQRIT WPR to COLs ENJGT. Stunning remaining KREL forces. Ship external defenses at 62% KVACT. Main weapons charging. On the bridge, Zexthal watched in horror as defense turrets deployed around him. His officers fell one by one as stun beams hit them. The commander drew his blaster and fired at a turret, destroying it. "This ship is mine," he shouted, backing toward the exit. A stun beam caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell against the captain's chair, injured but still conscious. Outside, the Krell warships began powering up their tractor beams. They would capture the Defiant and drag it back to Krell space for study and dismantling. "We need to get to the bridge," Joe said. "Can you clear a path?" "PAT to bridge clearing. Proceed to MAN elevator." Joe left engineering and ran to the elevator. The doors opened automatically as he approached. Inside, he found 2 stunned Krell guards. He stepped over them and pressed the button for the bridge. As the elevator rose, Joe felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. For years, he had been nothing but a slave. Now he was taking control of a legendary warship with enemies all around. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened to reveal the bridge of the Defiant. Zexthal looked up from the captain's chair, his reptilian eyes filled with hatred. "Human," he hissed, raising his blaster with his good arm. "What have you done?" Joe ducked as the blaster shot flew over his head. The bolt hit the wall behind him, leaving the smoking hole. Zexthal struggled to stand, his injured shoulder making his aim poor. "Stop this madness, human," the Krell commander hissed. "You cannot hope to escape." A defense turret dropped from the ceiling and fired. The stun beam hit Zexthal directly in the chest. The commander collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Joe ran to the captain's chair and sat down. Screens lit up around him, showing the outside view. The 3 Krell warships had the Defiant surrounded. Their weapons were powering up. "They're going to fire on us," Joe said nervously. "Shields activating. Taking EVASIV action." The ship shuddered as the shields came online. Outside, the tractor beams from the Krell warships locked onto the Defiant. "Warning. Tractor beams engaged. Breaking free. While require fuel engine power." "Do it," Joe said. "Whatever it takes." The engines of the Defiant roared to life for the first time in centuries. The mighty warship pulled against the tractor beams, straining to break free. The salvage ship, still docked to the Defiant, was torn away by the sudden movement, spinning off into space. On the screens, Joe watched as the first Krell warship fired. Green energy beams struck the Defiant's shields. The ship shook violently. Shields holding at 84%. Weapons systems online. Weapon controls appeared in front of Joe. Athena highlighted the targets and firing solutions. "I've never fired a ship's weapons before," Joe said. "I will guide you. Place your hands on the controls." Joe grabbed the controls. They felt warm, almost alive under his touch. The targeting system locked onto the nearest Krell warship. "Fire," Joe whispered. Brilliant blue beams shot from the Defiant, striking the Krell ship. The enemy vessel's shields flared but held. Joe fired again, this time hitting the engines. The Krell ship spun out of formation, its tractor beam disengaging. 1 down, 2 to go, Joe said with growing confidence. The remaining Krell ships adjusted their strategy. One moved behind the Defiant while the other stayed in front. They fired simultaneously. The Defiant rocked hard, throwing Joe against his restraints. Shields at 62%. Recommend activation of Phantom Drive. Phantom Drive. What's that? Experimental technology. Allows phase IFT through solid matter. Never fuloitest before hibernation. Joe looked at the screens showing the Krell ships closing in. Do we have a choice? Negi activating Phantom Drive. A low hum filled the bridge. Joe felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body. The view screens showed a blue glow forming around the ship. Drive in NJGGD. Plotting course through Carry Aldrenot. Through it? Are you serious? Joe asked in shock. The Defiant accelerated toward the larger of the 2 Krell ships. Joe gripped the arms of the captain's chair, certain he was about to die. On the screen, the hull of the Krell ship grew larger and larger until it filled the entire view, and then they were inside it. The Defiant passed through the Krell ship like a ghost. Joe could see the enemy crew through the view screens, their faces shocked as the human warship moved through their vessel. For a few seconds, the Defiant existed in the same space as the Krell dreadnought, 2 solid objects impossibly occupying the same area. Then they were through, emerging from the rear of the Krell ship. The Phantom Drive disengaged, and the Defiant became fully solid again. Phantom DRIVCUOLFDODN required. 30 minutes until next use. The 2 remaining Krell ships turned in confusion. They had never seen technology like this before. Joe seized the opportunity and fired the Defiant's weapons again, targeting the engines of the second ship. Direct hit. The Krell vessel lost power and drifted. The last Krell ship began charging its main cannon, preparing to fire a devastating blast. Joe turned the Defiant away and pushed the engines to maximum. Can we jump to hyperspace? Joe asked. HIPERDRIV charging. 87% ready. The Krell fired. The beam clipped the rear of the Defiant, rocking the ship violently. Warning lights flashed across the control panels. Damage to rear sections. Shields at 41%. HYPERDRIV at 100%. Jump, Joe shouted. The stars stretched into lines as the Defiant leaped into hyperspace, leaving the stunned Krell fleet behind. Joe slumped back in the captain's chair, hardly believing they had escaped. Navigation Celestiums Online. Plotting course to ARC2RUS system. Joe nodded, catching his breath. How long until we get there? 3 days at QRENT speed. Ship repairs underway. Joe looked around the bridge of the mighty warship. Just hours ago, he had been a slave with no hope. Now he was the captain of humanity's most legendary vessel, heading for a star system that might hold the last free humans. Let's finish this mission, Joe said quietly, for Captain Ward and her crew. For 3 days, the Defiant traveled through hyperspace. Joe spent the time learning about the ship from Athena. The AI showed him how to operate the weapons, how to read the sensors, and how to make basic repairs. Joe slept in the captain's quarters, surrounded by Captain Ward's personal items. It felt strange to use her room, but Athena insisted it was appropriate for the acting captain. Are we sure the colony even exists? Joe asked on the 3rd day. He sat in the bridge, watching the hyperspace tunnel through the view screen. Historical records and DIC-8 zone ships were sent to ARC2RUS via 4 Earth FEL. No environment of survival. Joe nodded. It was a slim hope, but it was all they had. The ship's repairs were going well. The automated systems had sealed the damaged sections and restored power to most areas. The shields were back to 78%, and weapons were fully operational. Preparing to exit hyperspace. Arrival 8 ARC2RUS system. In 3 minutes. Joe straightened in his chair. This was it. Either they would find other humans, or they would be alone in enemy territory with no allies. The blue tunnel of hyperspace began to fade. Stars reappeared as the Defiant slowed to normal speed. The Arcturus system appeared on the view screen, a yellow sun with 7 planets orbiting it. The 4th planet was green and blue, similar to Earth, but Joe's attention was drawn to something else, a massive asteroid field between the 3rd and 4th planets. CANNING asteroid field. Unusual energy re-ADNGs DTKT. Could be natural, Joe said, trying not to get his hopes up. Need GATIV. Energy signature ATCHES human technology. Detecting artificial structures within large asteroids. Joe leaned forward, his heart racing. Send a message. Tell them who we are. MESSAGECNTONENCR WAPTHD Humane Military FREQNCI. Waiting FRRESPONSC. For several minutes, there was silence. Then the communication system lit up. Unidentified vessel. This is Arcturus Defense Command, a woman's voice said. She sounded cautious but hopeful. You're broadcasting on a frequency not used in 300 years. Identify yourself immediately. Joe took a deep breath. This is Joe Matthews aboard the U.S. Defiant. I've escaped from the Krell with this ship. I'm looking for 4 free humans. There was a long pause. Did you say the Defiant? The woman asked, her voice shaking slightly. That's impossible. The Defiant was lost in the last battle. Joe, Transanite AAUTHENTIE. Unkukoti. Alpha CDVN9 Delta. Joe repeated the code. There was another long silence. Then new voices joined the communication, talking excitedly in the background. Defiant, you are cleared to approach, the woman said finally. Follow the beacon to Docking Bay 3. Welcome to Aurora Colony. Small lights appeared, guiding the ship toward the largest asteroid in the field. As they approached, Joe saw that what looked like a simple rock from a distance was actually a bustling space station. Parts of it were built into the asteroid, making it nearly invisible to casual scans. Smaller ships moved around it, some of them clearly human designs. The Defiant docked at a large bay. Through the view screens, Joe could see people gathering. Humans, all of them. Some wore uniforms, others civilian clothes. They stared at the massive warship with awe and disbelief. I can't believe it, Joe whispered. They survived. Humans survived. A delegation waited as Joe exited the ship. Leading them was a tall woman with short gray hair and a serious face. She wore a blue uniform with captain's insignia. I'm Kate Donovan, leader of Aurora Colony, she said, looking Joe over carefully. And you're not Defiant crew. How did you get this ship? Joe explained everything. His life as a slave, the Krell finding the Defiant HFY awakening, and their desperate escape. As he spoke, HFY displayed data on a portable screen, showing the ship's mission and the quantum shield technology. This technology could change everything, Donovan said, examining the data. We've been hiding for centuries, unable to fight back against Krell weapons. With this, her words were cut short by an alarm. A young officer ran up to her. Captain, long-range sensors have detected a Krell battle fleet entering the system, he reported urgently. At least 12 warships, including a dreadnought. They're heading straight for us. Donovan's face darkened. They followed you, she said to Joe. Impossible, Joe replied. We were in hyperspace. They couldn't track us. Analysis CGGESTs HUOMNANDR ZEXTKHAL may have VPLACD tracking device during a nightingale salvage operation. Joe closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. I've led them right to you. Donovan straightened her back, determination replacing fear. Then we'll face them. For the first time, we have a weapon that might work against them. How quickly can we adapt this shield technology to our ships? The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Teams of engineers from Aurora Colony swarmed over the Defiant, studying the quantum shield technology. Joe worked alongside them, helping ATGENA explain the complex systems. The colony scientists were amazed by how advanced the technology was, even 300 years later. We can adapt this to our ships, said Pete Dawson, the colony's chief engineer. He was an older man with skilled hands and quick eyes. Not perfectly, but enough to give us a fighting chance. Kate Donovan organized the colony's defenses. They had 20 small warships, mostly patrol vessels, and converted cargo ships. None were as powerful as the Defiant, but together they formed a respectable fleet. Every available pilot and crew member was called to duty. The Krell will reach us in 2 hours, Donovan announced to the gathered ship captains. We need to evacuate as many civilians as possible while we hold them off. Joe stood at her side, now wearing a borrowed uniform. He felt strange being treated like a leader, but the colonists looked at him with respect. He had brought them both danger and hope. The Defiant will lead the defense, Joe said. It has the strongest shields and weapons. And it's what they're after, Donovan added. If we can draw their attention, the civilian ships have a better chance of escaping. The evacuation began immediately. Women, children, and non-military personnel boarded transport ships that would take them deeper into the asteroid field, where they could hide until it was safe to return, or to flee further if necessary. Joe returned to the Defiant. The ship had been repaired as much as possible in the short time available. The engineers had integrated the colony's communication systems with ATGENA, allowing better coordination between ships. Are we ready? Joe asked as he settled into the captain's chair. Defiant at 89% combat capability. Quantum shield technology CCE is FULY2RN SFERED2 colony vessels. Awaiting your orders, Captain. The defense fleet moved into position at the edge of the asteroid field. The 20 colony ships formed a protective line, with the Defiant in the center. On the long-range sensors, they could see the Krell fleet approaching. 12 warships led by a massive dreadnought. That's a lot of firepower, Joe said quietly. Analyses INDICATES QOMMANDER ZEX THAL was aboard EDA dreadnought. He appears DTT or I need to reach to this vessel. Then let's disappoint him. The minutes ticked by. The civilian evacuation ships slipped away behind them, heading for safety. Finally, the Krell fleet came into visual range. The warships spread out in an attack formation. All ships engage quantum shields, Donovan ordered from her vessel. A soft blue glow surrounded each human ship as the shields activated. The Defiant's shield was brightest of all, pulsing with energy. The Krell opened fire. Green energy beams struck the human ships. In the past, such an attack would have destroyed them instantly. But now the quantum shields absorbed the energy, holding firm. The human fleet returned fire, their weapons finding weak points in the Krell defenses. For a while, it seemed like they might win. 3 Krell ships were heavily damaged and fell back. But then the dreadnought moved forward, its massive weapons charging. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Donovan shouted. The dreadnought fired. The beam was far more powerful than anything the quantum shields had faced. 2 colony ships were hit and exploded instantly. 3 more suffered severe damage. We can't hold them off much longer, Joe said grimly. Captain, IAKVBENANALOIZ and Captain Ward's is a final orders. There is one Pirotosicoa. We AAVNOT yet activated. What protocol? Plurotosio Ulfoenix. Captain Weir did not just SAV the defiant. She coordinated EYF of their ship captains. Multiple vessels were hidden throughout the SCT-TOR, all in high BERNATLION mode, like the defiant. Joe's eyes widened. You mean there are more ships like this one out there? Affirmative. I can send the activations original. However, ITNNOTGUARANTE. How many have survived or dwelled or respawned? Do it, Joe ordered. Send the signal. The Defiant transmitted a powerful burst of energy. It was a simple code, repeating over and over. Wake up, wake up, wake up. For a moment, nothing happened. The battle continued, with the human fleet taking more damage. The dreadnought moved closer, preparing to fire again. Then the sensors lit up. Hyperspace windows began opening all around them. 1, then 3, then 8, then more. Ships emerged, human warships, dormant for centuries, now awakening just like the Defiant. Some were damaged, some were perfect. All were ready to fight. The colony ships cheered as the reinforcements arrived. The Krell fleet hesitated, suddenly outnumbered. All ships, attack pattern Delta, Joe commanded, feeling Captain Ward's spirit beside him. Let's show them humanity isn't defeated yet. The human fleet surged forward, old and new ships fighting side by side. The quantum shields gave them protection against the Krell weapons, and their combined firepower was overwhelming. The dreadnought tried to retreat, but it was too late. Human ships surrounded it, targeting its engines and weapons. In the end, it was the Defiant that fired the final shot, destroying the dreadnought's command center. The remaining Krell ships fled, jumping to hyperspace to escape. Joe stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching as the human fleet regrouped. 23 ships had responded to the Phoenix Protocol. Combined with the colony vessels, they now had a real fighting force. For the first time in centuries, humans had won a major battle against the Krell. What now, Captain? Donovan asked over the communication channel. Joe looked at the stars beyond the view screen. Now we take the fight to them. Humanity is back.